Good morning, everyone. I'm Josh Miller, the Cambridge Somerville editor at the Boston Globe, and we're thrilled to welcome Senator Ed Markey to the Boston Globe Sustainability Summit for this fireside chat. Thanks so much for being here, Senator.
Great to be with you. Thank you. Thank you all. Great to see you.
A son of Malden and a longtime leader on environmental and climate efforts, Markey was a state representative and then a congressman for many years before being elected to the United States Senate in 2013. There is extraordinary anger among progressives in Massachusetts who care about climate. They're mad at Trump for rolling back environmental regulations, for rolling back decades of what they see as progress on fighting climate change. But I also hear great anger at Senator Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader, for agreeing to move forward a GOP budget bill that kept government open without, in progressive view, extracting any meaningful concessions. And their anger is white hot that Schumer didn't use Democrats' leverage to push back on Trump. Senator, you voted against that bill. Do you share the base's fury at Senator Schumer?
Well, I voted against giving the Republicans the votes. I believed that we should have stood and fought. That was my position. And my own belief is that we must be the resistance. We must be fighting on each and every one of these issues, including climate and the impacts which these votes can have on the climate. I was heartened, to be honest with you, by the 50,000 people that came out to Boston Common, that marched on City Hall. I can see how people are standing up and fighting. And that's my view, because right now we're moving up to a battle on reconciliation. We're moving into a battle on the debt ceiling. And the Democrats have to be listening to the base. They have to be listening to people out there who are angry at what is happening, upset at Trump trying to dismantle the New Deal, the Great Society, the Inflation Reduction Act, the Climate Bank, everything across the board is within his crosshairs. So my belief is that the Democrats must stand united and fight against Republicans to force them to absolutely consume every possible moment procedurally that they have to consume. We finished at 3 a.m. on Friday morning, forcing them to use up every single moment. Last week we finished at 3 a.m. on Saturday morning. We're just saying we're forcing you. We're going to use every single procedural motion. I'm voting against every single Trump nominee. I'm voting no on every one of the nominees. I'm putting a hold on the NASA administrator. I'm putting a hold on other of the Trump nominees who are seeking to dismantle this incredible infrastructure which we've put together in our country. So I believe we have to fight, and we have to fight every single day, and that's what I have been doing right from the beginning of this Trump administration.
I hear your anger at the Trump administration's actions. Do you also feel anger towards Senator Schumer for allowing that budget bill to move forward?
I disagreed with him. I voted no, but we could be within weeks of having a huge debate on the Senate floor on the dismantling of all environmental, health care, education, all programs, Medicaid, NIH, Title I for poor children, the SNAP program. It's all going to be on the table, all to give a tax break to millionaires and billionaires. So right now, although I disagreed with Senator Schumer, although I voted no, and I voted no with the greatest of enthusiasm against the Republicans, we have to get united right now. We need to stand united against them. We need a common plan, and Democrats are united. I think I think you're going to see that over these next couple of months as we stand up to the Republicans, even those of us who disagreed with and voted against Chuck Schumer on the Senate floor.
I want to pick up on something you said in your answer, which you mentioned the debt ceiling vote, which is probably coming up in the next few months, definitely this year. Would you use a vote on raising the debt ceiling, a vote on the full faith and credit of the United States as leverage to extract Trump concessions on climate?
The Republicans want to use the debt ceiling as a mechanism to effectuate a tax break for millionaires and billionaires at the expense of education, healthcare, environmental, food programs in our country. So I would use the debt ceiling. I would use any mechanism in order to put pressure on the Republicans to make it impossible for them to escape the responsibility for having to try to cut all of those programs, including the climate programs, and put pressure upon moderate Republicans, if that's not an oxymoron, so that's not a contradiction in terms, because we just saw is this. Elise Stefanik just was pulled back as the nominee for UN ambassador, although she had won her seat by 22% in New York in November. They were not confident she could win in March of 2025. So we have to continue to build the pressure so that we do our absolute historical best to push moderate Republicans off of the Trump agenda, and that means that we can't cooperate with them. They own this. It's their problem. It's what they're trying to do, and I do not believe that we should be trying in any way to help them.
You mentioned some of these things, but just in recent weeks, the president has issued executive orders to revive the use of coal in power plants to try and resuscitate coal. He's opened up vast swaths of national forest land to logging. He's aiming to thwart state and local climate efforts, trying to undo large parts of NOAA, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's hard, I think, for people who care about climate to sometimes figure out the signal from the noise. From your vantage point, what's the most damaging action President Trump has taken on climate since he was sworn in January?
Well, on Fox News, every night they talk about the Green New Scam. Every night, all day, every single program. Now, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and I, we introduced the Green New Deal. And the Green New Deal unleashed a youth movement across our nation that propelled itself into the 2020 election. Every Democratic presidential candidate, including Joe Biden, had a promise to have a huge climate program. That was the goal that AOC and I, a great Boston University graduate, by the way, brilliant, that's what we created. And that ultimately resulted in the IRA passing in 2022. Now, the only reason it's called the IRA is that Joe Manchin, we needed his vote. So he got naming rights to it. I would have called it the biggest climate bill in the history of the world, which it was. And that bill has already unleashed $400 billion worth of investment, created 400,000 new jobs. Just last year, 40,000 megawatts of solar was installed in the United States, 7,000 megawatts of wind. And of all installed electrical generation capacity in the United States in 2024, 94% was wind, solar, and battery storage. 94%. That's an existential threat to the business model of the natural gas industry in our country, which is why the natural gas industry raised at least $100 million and gave it to Trump in the election with the promise that he would kill the IRA, that he would then open up public lands for more coal and oil and gas drilling. And it's all part of the corrupt bargain, the totally corrupt bargain that Trump cut with the oil and gas and coal industry in the 2024 election cycle. So it's not just that he's going to try to kill the IRA to kill the climate bill in terms of the funding that was going into all of these different programs across our country very successfully. But it's also then simultaneously to despoil our public lands in our nation. So it's happening. I'll give you one example, Josh, if I may. I was able to build a $20 billion climate bank into the IRA, into the climate bill in 2022. And 60% of the funding has to go to black, brown, and disadvantaged communities. That's the way I wrote it. McKinsey says that it will unleash $250 billion worth of public and private sector investment over the first 10 years. That's a threat to the oil and gas industry. So what happened in the administration is that they ordered the head of the criminal division in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, D.C., to find a crime in the bank. The woman who runs the bank said, I cannot find it. And she was a clerk on the Supreme Court for a Republican justice. She's been in the division for 20 years. They forced her to resign 6 weeks ago and named a new person to take over who would say that they could find a crime inside of the bank. That then went to court. The judge looked down at this attorney for the government and said, I do not think you are telling me the truth. And thus far, they have presented no evidence of a crime inside the bank. That's how committed they are. That's how unethical this entire process is. It's not unlike this young father down in El Salvador right now, where they're not charging him with any crime. It's not unlike Rumesa Ozturk, who was just taken from Tufts University. She's not been charged with a crime. They're abusing the criminal justice process in order to accomplish their ideological agenda. So I could even they're going to try to dismantle the Civilian Climate Corps, which Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and I, which we introduced and Joe Biden put in place just last April, which is 20,000 young people across the country working inside the federal government on climate, on sustainability programs. That as well is going to be under attack. So I could go down a whole litany, Joshua, of programs which they're attacking, but I guess you could assume it's everything, because that's the promise they made in return for at least $100 million worth of campaign contributions.
But in terms of most damaging, do you see the efforts to unwind the bank within the IRA?
No, that's part of it. I would say the IRA itself was $369 billion. But it turns out that that understated dramatically the amount of funding that it was going to unleash. Goldman and others say that it would be $1.2 trillion worth of public monies that would then unleash $4 to $5 trillion worth of private sector investment. So if you have companies here today who are at Greentown in Somerville, there's 120 companies over there, at the Engine in Cambridge, they all qualify for the tax break because they're going to reduce greenhouse gases. So we right here in Boston, we are the engine of change. We are the innovation that's going to displace the oil and gas and coal industry with the new technologies of the future. They have to try to kill all those companies in the same way that they're defunding the National Institutes of Health and the research for Alzheimer's and cancer and heart disease, et cetera. They're doing the same thing for clean energy by trying to remove all those tax breaks that are inside the IRA. We're going to have that battle in the reconciliation bill. We're going to have that battle as part of the debt ceiling debate over whether or not all these tax breaks, which have revolutionized how states and private sector companies view clean energy technologies, are going to stay on the books. And again, as I said, $400 billion worth of investment has already been unleashed, and 400,000 new jobs, and 80% of them are in red and purple states. So as they say, we're going to dismantle the new car factories in Georgia or Kentucky. They're looking at making Republican members of the House especially very vulnerable to dismantling of a long-term economic growth opportunity for their home districts.
You mentioned court challenge and the climate bank you talked about. I believe it's in federal court in Washington, D.C. I guess my question is, so many of these climate efforts, so many of these other efforts are tied up in court. Is the judicial branch, which seems less co-equal by the day, is it up for the challenge to its legitimacy from the White House? In other words, can the courts keep up with Donald Trump?
So far, the courts have. And again, he may be right now, Trump may be creating a constitutional crisis in what he's doing with this El Salvadoran who has been removed from the United States. But I think when we saw about 4 weeks ago, Amy Coney Barrett voted to mandate that the $2 billion that had already been committed be sent to USAID for poverty programs around the world. She was inundated with death threats. She has small children. The Republicans are calling for the impeachment of judges who don't agree with Donald Trump's every decision. There's an increase in security of federal judges all across the country right now. I'm being visited by representatives of the judiciary asking for more security. By the way, not just nationally, but here for state judges as well. That is happening. And I think that it's trying to create a climate that intimidates the Supreme Court when they finally have all of the major constitutional decisions that they're going to have to reach later on this year, maybe as early as May or June. They're going to have to confront some of these major decisions. I think they're trying to intimidate the Supreme Court, to be honest with you, by threatening the impeachment down below, by having this unleashed conservative social media assault on Justice Amy Coney Barrett and others. So I hope they're up to it, okay? You asked me a good question. I hope that they're up to it. I'm so proud of Wilma Hale, the law firm here in Boston, for standing up and fighting. I'm so proud of Harvard University for now saying we're going to stand up and fight. We're going to take them to court. We need major players to stand up and to go to court, to bring all of the firepower of Boston as the leader to this battle. We're only 2% of America, but not an ordinary 2%, okay, of population. And I'm so proud of Harvard. I'm so proud of Wilma Hale. I'm so proud of the 50,000 people that showed up. We were the biggest 2 weeks ago. And we have to do it again and again and again this year. We have to stand up. We have to fight. We have to mobilize. We can't agonize. We got to organize here, Boston. We have to fight him and fight his administration and his authoritarian ways every single step of the way.
I guess I just want to go back to the words you used. You said, I hope they're up for it, referring to the courts. What if they're not?
We have to fight, obviously, in the courts. We have to fight on the floor of the House and Senate. And we have to go to the streets, too. We need people to stand up and to fight. In the first Trump term, in January of 2017, there were 100,000 people on Boston Common. There were not 100,000 people on Boston Common in January of 2025. It's been a little bit delayed, but it's coming. I feel it everywhere. People are angry. They're outraged at what he's doing. And I just think that what just happened 2 weeks ago here in Boston is just a preview of what is going to be unleashed. And that's going to speak to the courts as well. They're going to see what the reaction is going to be of the people in our country if they abdicate their judicial responsibility to ensure that the Constitution, the rule of law, is upheld. And it's going to absolutely require the American people to stand up and to be counted. Because I'll be fighting every day on the Senate floor. Senator Warren will be fighting every day on the Senate floor. But Congress is a stimulus response institution, and there's nothing more stimulating than millions of people up and organizing. I can already feel amongst many of my colleagues, all of a sudden, they're hearing the people speak from the grassroots. So we're up first, but we're going to need allies if ultimately we're going to be successful. But that's then going to be communicated, I think, and hope to give the courage to at least two of the Republican appointed Supreme Court justices that they will, in fact, uphold Marbury versus Madison, that the Supreme Court determines what the law is in our nation and strike down any and all of the constitutional violations which this administration is seeking to implement.
That's one answer to the question I'm about to ask you, that people who care about climate should go to protest. But something I've heard from your constituents in Massachusetts who care about climate is, what can they do specifically? So if I'm hearing you, one answer is show up for protests, bring your friends and family, is what you're saying. What else can people who care about climate, who are worried by the actions of the Trump administration, what else in your view can they do?
You can support your the nonprofit organizations that are fighting, including the ACLU, but there's a whole long list, Planned Parenthood, go down the line. Just people who are taking this administration to court. They need help. They need support. You can see how Trump is running an extortion racket right now. He's actually going to have some of the most powerful law firms in America capitulate and be providing free legal services to this administration. So to the extent to which, ordinary citizens can help to contribute to these nonprofits who are going to be taking these cases to court, they're going to need the help. Environmental groups included. They're going to need the help. Similarly, the Trump administration, his campaign, they were very effective in the campaign in 2024 on social media. Everyone needs to play this role on social media. This is the most digitally savvy state in the United States. So to the extent to which all of these incredible creative skills are here inside of our community, we have to be contesting, contrasting, and fighting every single day online as well, and then organizing, coming out and showing this collective power, because it's not just climate, it's education, it's healthcare, it's the most vulnerable. This is a collective response we need. It's not just one issue, it's all issues in a coalition right now. Every group has to protect every other group because it's all interrelated. That's how Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and I wrote the Green New Deal. Everyone said, why did you include healthcare? Why did you include education? Why did you include the disadvantaged communities? Why did you include food? Why did you include all those things in the Green New Deal? This is why we did it, because it's all interrelated, intersectional. It's all part of one common story. That's what has to come out right now, that every group has to protect every other group because it's all interrelated.
I want to ask you two more questions. We have about 5 minutes remaining. Based on recent data I've seen, solar and onshore wind are the cheapest energy source by megawatt hour. And I guess I'm wondering your view, even amidst Trump's actions, can capitalism, unfettered capitalism, be the solution here on allowing for more renewables?
Around the world, last year, for the first time, there was more investment in solar than in oil, globally. Yes, we believe there's an existential threat to the planet, which climate change poses. But oil, gas, and coal know that wind and solar and other renewables are an existential threat to their very existence as industries. Capitalism is embracing renewables. It's lower cost. And so that's why those industries want to take all the tax breaks that we just passed in 2022 off the books. That's why Trump has issued an order questioning any offshore wind across Massachusetts and up and down the whole coastline. It's very hard to build offshore wind if the Department of Interior is not issuing permits. So even if the private sector wants to do it, if the Department of Interior is going to fight you, then it is very dangerous. So if you take, for example, the Pilgrim nuclear power plant in Plymouth was 600 megawatts of electricity. Vineyard Wind is 800 megawatts of electricity. And combined with battery storage technology, and then the next 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,000 megawatts of offshore wind that we were planning on installing, goodbye natural gas industry. We don't need you anymore. Take your pipelines out, and you're not going to build any new ones. And they know it. And the same thing was true for New York, and for New Jersey, and for Delaware, and Virginia. That's why he has ordered one of these executive orders to review every single permit that has been granted, because it's an existential threat to the natural gas industry all along the East Coast of the United States. Because if he doesn't do that, all the executive orders in the world won't open up more natural gas and oil land on public lands that the industry will even want to use, because there will be no demand for it, because we will have substituted renewable electricity for natural gas generated electricity. By the way, the same thing is true for all electric vehicles. All electric vehicles are the existential threat to the oil industry. We put 70% of all oil we consume into gasoline tanks. The faster this moves towards all electric vehicles or plug-in hybrids, it's the oil industry just collapses. So it's all on the line in the next 2 to 3 months. We're going to have it out over each and every one of these issues, and we're going to have to take them to court on many of them, because what they're doing is unconstitutional. It's almost like an illegal taking. So capitalism, and then your question is, in the absence of those tax breaks, will it continue to move? Offshore wind, to some extent, but the permits that have not been completed yet, going to be very difficult. For solar, for all electric vehicles, yeah, there'll be some progress, but it'll only be at maybe half the rate at which it would have been if the tax breaks stayed on the books. If it was 5 years from now, we probably wouldn't need the tax breaks anymore. But for now, still at this early stage, I'll just give you one final number if I can. In 2009, when the Waxman-Markey bill passed on the Senate floor, which was the most comprehensive climate bill in history, an 80% reduction in greenhouse gases by the year 2050, and then Mitch McConnell killed it in the Senate, we had 2,000 total megawatts of solar installed in the United States. 2,000 total. Last year, 40,000 new megawatts were installed. 1 year. This year, it was going to be 45,000 new megawatts. That's what's happening. In 2009, we had 2,000 total all-electric vehicles in the United States. Total. Last year, 1.5 million, and growing, and growing, and growing, going vertical. That's what's frightening them. So that it's all on the line, and we're just going to have to fight in order to be successful. I'm sorry.
No, we have 30 seconds left. I just wanted to end by asking you, what gives you hope?
Young people give me hope. Young people give me hope. It's their world. They're the Green New Deal generation. They're the ones that created the movement, that created the momentum, that created the moment that Joe Biden signed that bill. That was not on anyone's agenda. By the way, no reporter asked Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump a question about climate change in 2016. Can you imagine that? So the Green New Deal, it fixed that problem. Okay, and it was young people who did it. So what gives me the greatest hope is that this is the most idealistic activist generation that our country has ever seen. And I have the greatest of confidence that they're going to rise up and give the leadership to older generations that are going to change the political dynamic in 2026 and 2028 in this country. And coming out of Boston University with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ayanna Pressley, all of the great leaders who have come from the school, going all the way back to Senator Ed Markey, I am absolutely confident that that hope will turn into action. And I can't thank you all enough.
On that note, thank you very much, Senator Ed Markey. Thanks so much to all of you watching online. Thanks to everyone here at Boston University, and stay tuned for your next panel.